feel like GIFG is actually get into new fighting games and assumes you kind of already think fighting games are cool and is like a encyclopedia of look at all these new fighting games. But I feel like Wooly doesn't appreciate just how fucking terrible the average person is at fighting games when they start playing them. They're really bad. And it's so vicious. It's so demoralizing. Like, the best thing you could ever do to start playing fighting games is find somebody else with you that is also trash. Like, just trash. Right? And then just level up together. Is there any genre with as hard of an entry point as fighting games? Yeah, the MOBAs are pretty bad. MOBAs are pretty vicious. Certain first person shooters, it's not like a skill gap, it's not like a knowledge gap, it's just like a reflex gap, can be really, really mean. Oh, these some Dawntrail leaks. Oh, I mean, I would never look at a leak. I mean, I would never read anything that I'm not supposed to read. Did I make a face? I made a crazy face. Oh yeah, hold on. You said you tweeted it at me, Erie? That was really fast. Where did I find those leaks so I know where to stay away from? Somebody didn't send them to me. I don't know where they came from. Wait a second. Hold on. These aren't data mines. These are leaks. I don't have to pretend. All right. Grain of salt. Grain of salt. Someone asked about Dark Knight. Damnation, 40% mitigation, 2-minute cooldown, 55 potency recoil to enemy. Grants primeval impulse when it expires. Salvation effect is a 400 potency regen for 15 seconds. This is the Vengeance upgrade. Shadowed Vigil grants Vigilant, which is a 1200 heal X-Cog. Great Nebula is a 20% max HP increase and then restores that. Man, these tank mitts are fucking lit. X-Cog is a heal that goes off after you lose a certain amount of health. Bro, Dawntrail enemies are going to hit us. They're going to hit us really fucking hard. Okay, so you want to know how hard enemies are going to hit us in Dawntrail? You want to hear this? Okay. You want to hear the capstone scholar ability? Seraphism, level 100. 180-second recast. Gradually restores HP of self and all party members within 50 yards with a cure potency of 100. Changes Adlo to manifestation and consultation to cessation. Additional effect, resets emergency tactics recast. That is a oh fuck button. That is a oh fuck button. Twitch is updating sub prices in various countries. I mean, that makes sense with inflation. Please continue to subscribe to Pat Stares At. If you don't want to, you can also use your credit card to use direct donations for the same amount, which I actually get more of. Maryland Jutsu, these are not data mines. These are leaks. That's different. That's different. Unfortunately, the main leak that I want to see, which is Dark Knight, is not really available here. Professional Witchburner kicked in $7.77. Thanks, Witchburner. Sorry for the spam, but my fiance would kill me if I didn't recommend her current hyperfixation. Nine Souls is in her world, Hollow Knight, but Sekiro inspired. Just released and is made by the guys who made Detention and Devotion. I didn't finish your message. I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Thank you for reminding me right away, Mr. Fantastic. That actually is really nice. I have like 10 hours in Nine Souls. That game's incredible. No. So Mr. Fantastic continued to say, also the DreamHack tournaments were all on at the same time and they were hype. Unfortunately, you have not managed to get me out of fighting games. Hope you and Peach are well. Pet babies. Will do. Thanks, man. Dark Knight's effect is an XCOG. Yeah, I know that, but I want more. I want my new Shadowbringer move. Behavior just laid off 95 people. Maybe they should. You know what? You know what's like the most fucked up, stupid thing to say? I can't fucking stand it. When you see like a game company lay off like 100 people and you see somebody go, maybe they should fix the survivor meta. Then they wouldn't have to lay anyone. I was like, shut the fuck up. Shut up. Doomsday Dan kicked in a sub. Thanks, man. The only game that should have frame drops in the trailer is EDF. Ooh, that's good. Will I be streaming the new COD reveal after the Microsoft stream for extra monies and 9/11 store bundle? I don't know. Depends what... I think something is right afterwards, but we'll have to see. Forlorn Carton sub. Thank you. So did Flighted Wings. Thanks, guys. Mordecai kicked in $5 to say, boy, I sure do love these games. Wish I had more than a nanosecond to get names. It was really bad. Really bad. Is EDF the only games that get a free pass looking and running like shit? Kinda. Get Gooey the Good, 87 subs. Is almost baby time. Almost. Jonath LP sub. Thanks, Jonath. Now that you're slowly working your way through the glut of games, are there any older games you're looking at to stream when things clear up? I would really like to stream Dishonored 2. I don't know if that's viable, and I don't know if anyone would care, but I never got around to it, and it looks cool. Professional Witchburner gifted a sub. Thanks, Witchburner. Appreciate it. Shinobi Phoenix kicked in a sub. I, too, have finally joined 14, but I didn't know the free trial is trapped on the platform you started on, so I'm playing on Xbox, so I have to sub. Our machinist, good to go for now. So, if you're playing Final Fantasy 14, here's a pro tip. This is a real pro tip. This is not a joke. The game's balance is very extreme. The difference between the best class and the worst class is like 2 or 3% damage. They are all pretty much the same. Pick whatever you think is cool to your eyeballs and you enjoy their mechanics. That's it. There are occasional outliers. Like Paladin was not super great for parts of Endwalker, and Dark Knight was like insanely overtuned. And Warrior had like a 5-year stint where it was just incredible, but overall, don't worry about it. Really, just like don't worry about it. Like, people have cleared ultimates with the most off-meta shit ever. It doesn't matter. You know? They're all good. The Royale kicked in $5. Thanks, man. Hello, Silk Song Cult member. I'm going to try and level Ninja, at least at level 80. The Rogue Quest is cool. I can't understand a fucking word they say, Pat. It's fucking sick. Happy Pride, y'all. Yeah, I liked the... Like, Aboro's fine. Aboro's okay. The rogues were way more interesting. Peepo the Red Panda sub. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And Ray Duran kicked in $5. When Arcane got shafted, a friend of mine was like, that's what they get for making Redfall. And I wanted to clothesline him. They didn't even want to make Redfall. That's the worst part. They didn't even want to. I didn't even want to. All right. Let's watch Iron Pineapple's video and find out about how big Shadow of the Erdtree is, shall we? I bet it's big. Oh my god, there's an ad. Oh, that's weird. Hold on, let me see if I can... Hey, do you guys... Do you guys remember when YouTube was like, stop ad blocker, and then your ad, it would be like, I can tell you're using ad blocker, and that just stopped working at all. Like, ad blocker just like conclusively beat them. It's also like really, really funny that as somebody who works on Twitch and YouTube and social media, that when they're like, we want you to stop watching ads, the response is, we want you to stop ad blocking on YouTube. My response is, I'm just not going to watch YouTube anymore. like I was like, they're updating Chrome this week to stop it. You know what? I'm not worried about it. Anyway. Oh, there's no sound. I should probably put sound on, huh?
Fellas, we are so back. I was recently invited to
Love
LA
you,
to
Iron
attend an
Pineapple.
Elden Ring DLC preview event. While there, I had the opportunity to play the game hands-on for 3 hours and experience the first region of the DLC. You can think of this as the Limgrave of the expansion. Despite the time limit, I think I was able to see almost everything. If you just want the short version of my thoughts, what I've seen so far is great, and I'm optimistic for the rest of the DLC. From Software has a proven track record for their DLCs being the best part of their Soulsborne games, and Shadow of the Erdtree is no exception, with the added bonus of it seemingly being by far their biggest DLC ever.
God
The
damn it.
bosses, enemies, dungeons, level design, weapons, spells, art direction, etc.
That is a cool
It's all
fucking
top-notch stuff,
sword!
and more or less exactly what you'd expect from FromSoft. That being said, the best way to describe this DLC would be more Elden Ring. I know that might seem redundant to point out,
I can't
but
believe
I
it.
think it's worth mentioning because we've all been waiting over 2 years, and the hype surrounding the release of this DLC is unprecedented.
I can't
With that
believe
type of hype, I think it's easy for expectations to balloon into something beyond the scope of the game. So yeah, it's more Elden Ring. If you love the base game, you'll love this. If you have issues with the base game, those are most likely still here. Anyway, let's talk details. The rest of this video will be me sharing my experience with the 3 hours I had to play the game while providing some overall impressions along the way. I'll also separate the video into sections, so you're free to skip around if you want to avoid certain things.
No, I'm
One
good.
last note before we get started, everyone who attended the event was unfortunately not allowed to record footage of their own gameplay. Instead, we were given 13 minutes of B-roll footage
Okay,
to work
that's
with
what's
for video
happening.
content. So while I'll do my best to match up the footage with what I'm talking about, just know that there's a lot of stuff I experienced that I simply don't have footage
What?
for. My play session began with a
You're a
choice between
rock.
3 different save files, a warrior, mage, and knight. I chose the knight, and that wound up being a dexterity build. Each of these save files was level 150 with multiple maxed out weapons in their inventory. After choosing my character, I loaded into the game right in front of the Hand of Miquella at the back of Mohg's boss room. I then touched the hand and was transported to the Land of Shadow. I was instantly
level
stunned by how
248.
beautiful this area was. The sky, the grass, the fog, the structures in the distance. The art direction of this initial reveal is insane, and FromSoft is once again proving that they have some of the most talented artists in the industry. From this first sight of grace, it was clear that I could head into multiple directions to reach different points of interest. But the first thing that caught my eye was a big fire guy in the distance, so I rode over on Torrent and was welcomed with him kicking flaming rocks in my face. Awesome attack, by the way. I really like this guy's design and the spectacle he provides as an introduction to the area. I spent a couple minutes jumping over his fire
Oh yeah, the
stomps
frame
and
rate's being
hacking away
iffy on my end specifically. Hold on, let me see if I can fix that a little bit. See, make that a little better. Uh-oh.
It's summer.
Hold on a second. Oh, you know what? I know exactly what it is. I know. I turned off hardware acceleration. How do I do that? Hold on, I'll have to do that again. I turned that off hoping that it would make the buffering shit go better. Ah, okay, yeah, that's what it was. All right. There we go. Back we go.
with a choice between 3 different save
My
files,
mistake,
a
everyone.
warrior, mage, and knight. I chose the knight, and that wound up being a dexterity build. Each of these save files was level 150 with multiple maxed out weapons in their inventory. After choosing my character, I loaded into the game right in front of the Hand of Miquella at the back of Mohg's boss room. I then touched the hand and was transported to the Land of Shadow. I was instantly stunned
Shadow
by
of
how
the Erdtree
beautiful this
is
area
3
was.
DLCs
The
in a trench
sky,
coat.
The grass, the fog, the structures in the distance. The art direction of this initial reveal is insane. And FromSoft is once again
Hey, look, there's a
proving that they
berserk
have some of
tree on
most
the
talented
right.
artists in the industry. From this first sight of grace, it was clear that I could head into multiple directions to reach different points of interest. But the first thing that caught my eye was a big fire guy in the distance. So I rode over on Torrent and was welcomed with him kicking flaming rocks in my face. Awesome attack, by the way. I really like this guy's design and the spectacle he provides as an introduction to the area.
He's
I spent
got
a couple
fire
minutes jumping
giant
over his fire
stuff
stumps
on
and
his
hacking away at
legs.
his ankles, but it was hardly doing any damage. And I figured it would be a bad idea to bang my head against the wall on this clearly optional encounter while under such a tight time limit. So I decided to just run past him. That being said, let it be known that I came back near the end of the play session and kicked his ass by just wailing on his ankles for 7 minutes straight. Following the road a bit further, I came across another site of grace with a couple NPCs standing nearby. There was also a glowing cross with an important new item next to it, a Scadutree fragment. These fragments are typically found
Scadutree.
near other crosses scattered around the map, and you can turn them in for Scadutree blessings at sites of grace. These blessings operate as permanent upgrades for your attack power and defense, but only when you're in the DLC area. The first upgrade costs 1 fragment, and then subsequent upgrades cost 2. And by the time I finished my play session, I'd raised my blessing level to 3 or 4. As for how much these boost you, I can't say for sure, but I did have the foresight to do a quick test when upgrading my blessing from level 2 to 3. I did a heavy charged attack on an unaware enemy. At blessing level 2, it did 1427 damage, and at level 3, it did 1491. If you do the
Okay, so I have a sneaking suspicion that what that is that the DLC caps your numbers, and then these upgrades like kind of uncap your damage and health.
That's a bit over 4% extra damage. One thing to note is that on the stats screen, my stats were colored gold. I was confused by this at first, but it's likely that this is just a visual representation of the blessing kicking in. Therefore, my guess is that instead of raising your attack and defense by a certain percentage, these blessings are probably just raising our stat values by flat amounts. Like my attack power stat went from 700 to 720 or something. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, that's my guess on how it works. On top of that, I found another new item that functioned like the Scatter Tree fragment, but for Spirit Ashes instead. These items converted into Revered Spirit Ash Blessings, which provided permanent upgrades to the attack and defense for all Spirit Ashes used in the DLC area. This came with the added bonus of making Torrent tankier as well, so even if you don't use Spirit Ashes, it's worth tracking these items down and upgrading your character with them. Between these two new items, I think this is a really fun way to approach upgrades for the DLC, as it allows high-level players with completed builds to still get meaningful boosts to their characters without horribly upsetting the balance of the base game when they leave the DLC. It also lets you re-experience that satisfaction of collecting upgrades via exploration like Golden Seeds and Sacred Tears, but this time in a new setting and with a new twist. Anyway, I talked with all the nearby NPCs, and the general vibe I got is that they're all trying to track down Miquella and figure out where he's going. These fragments and glowing crosses were left by Miquella, and the main story thread of the DLC seemed to be uncovering the path Miquella took and discovering what his goal is. I'm not the lore guy though, so if you want a deeper explanation than that, I'm sure Vaati has you covered. As I continued along the path, I eventually arrived at a long set of steps leading to a giant door. This was the entrance to the first legacy dungeon of the DLC, Belurot Tower Settlement. Long story short, this place fucking rules, and I'm mad I didn't get to explore it fully due to time constraints. I think a good way to sum this area up is that Stormveil meets Leyndell, whatever that means.
Oh man.
And it's pretty big. Lots of enemies, lots of ambushes, lots of secrets to find. It's good stuff. Legacy dungeons were the best part of the base game, and that is very much still the case here in the DLC. Now that we're getting to some proper combat, I want to take a few minutes to discuss some of the new weapons that were added. This is easily one of the biggest highlights
that's
of the whole
awesome.
DLC. I noticed that my character had multiple fully upgraded weapons in his inventory, so I did my best to switch weapons every 10 or 15 minutes to experience as much as I could. So first of all, in an interview from a few weeks ago, we learned that there would be 8 new weapon types, but we didn't know the specifics yet for what all 8 would be. Now we do. The 8 types are Light Greatsword, Martial Arts, Beast Claws, Perfume Bottles, Reverse Grip Swords, Throwing Daggers, Great Katana, and Dueling Shield. Let's start with the Light Greatsword. This was the starting weapon for me, and it's called the Milady. This thing is fantastic. It's quick and combo
Those aren't weapon
focused,
arts.
and the
That's
weapon
just
skill puts you in a
attacks.
stance that allows you to either do a set of quick slashes with R1 or a jumping lunge attack with R2. Also note that you'll do multiple swings with just a single input. Like the guard counter here is a 3-hit attack. I also noticed the jumping attacks were similar, with them being 2-hit combos
That's
just
hot!
from a single button press. This gives this weapon type a very distinct feel. I'm excited to see what other light greatswords exist in the DLC, since this one felt ridiculously smooth to use. After that, we have Martial Arts. Dude, this weapon just kicks ass. There's not much more to say. It felt so good to use, and the way the attacks combo into each other was awesome. To all my Dark Souls 2 fans, remember the Bone Fist weapon?
It
It's
kinda
like
sucks
but
that all
way
these
better.
new weird
So
things are
expect
stuck
a
in the
Ratatouille
DLC.
flashback moment when you get your hands on them. Next up, Beast Claws. Look at how fucking sick these things are. They're like the unhinged younger brother of the martial arts weapon. Flying around with them will make you feel like an actual animal, and while the obvious point of comparison would be the Beast Claws from Bloodborne, these ones feel notably faster and more acrobatic. Highly recommend. Perfume bottles are next. These ones really surprised me. You just get to throw out fire or lightning or whatever element. Surely it costs FP, right? Nope, you can do this as much as you want. And keep in mind, it's not a consumable. It's just a whole ass weapon type. So you have one-handed and two-handed movesets, running attacks, jumping attacks, everything. The charged heavy attack was my favorite, as it makes your character spin around, throwing the fire everywhere. And it's very effective in group settings. Following that, we have Reverse Grip Swords. This is actually the one weapon type I didn't get to try personally, but luckily we have a lot of footage of it here. As a bonus, check out this rapid fire crossbow they show off.
Yeah.
Anyway, these things seem especially fast and evasive. Like there's one move where you dash through the enemy while attacking at the same time. Also worth noting is that you can block with L1. Normally, this isn't possible when dual wielding 2 separate weapons, as L1 is the input to attack with both at the same time. So this confirms that they're a package deal, and as such, they have a more varied moveset. It also opens the door to landing guard counters while dual wielding. Very excited to try these. Next up, Throwing Daggers. Just like the perfume bottles, these caught me off guard because I was expecting there to be some sort of consumable or FP component to their attacks. But no, you can just rapid fire these out as much as you want and fully commit to a viable mid-range playstyle without ever running out. The weapon art has the added bonus of enabling the daggers to pierce through enemies. Next, we have the Great Katana. No footage of this one sadly, but it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a big katana. It's basically an odachi, which Neo fans should be familiar with.
Yeah.
Think length and girth rather than just length. Loved this weapon. The basic one has a weapon art that puts you in an overhead stance where R1 would be a quick slash down, and R2 would be 3 quick slashes instead. Lastly, we have the dueling shield. Sadly, the only footage we have of this thing is this one attack here during the upcoming boss fight. The shield had pointed edges, and the moveset involved a mix of thrusting and slashing attacks. It comes with the added bonus of being very well suited for guard counters when you two-hand it. And fun fact, this seems to be based on real-life dueling shields that actually existed. But yeah, as someone who gravitates toward goofy and gimmicky stuff, this one was surprisingly straightforward and honest. I think I need to mess around with it more before I settle on how I feel about it. So that's it for new weapon types, but there's one more big addition mixed into existing weapon types I want to mention. Check it out. Throwing weapons. These are new weapons that allow you to throw your weapon whenever you press R2 or strong attack, but they still double as melee weapons for light attacks. And guess what? 0 FP cost. You can throw them as much as you want. In my play session, I found a throwing axe, a throwing spear, and a throwing great hammer. The great hammer made me laugh out loud because the charged R2 attack involves spinning the hammer in a circle before launching it across the room for 2,000 damage. Think Mario 64 throwing Bowser, and you'll get the idea.
Yo, this is
really
awesome.
love how FromSoft is embracing all these ranged options and allowing more playstyles that seamlessly mix ranged and melee. Alright, that does it for weapons. Let's get back to the dungeon. Like I said, it's a great and beautiful area, and I just wish I had more time to explore it fully. At the end of the dungeon, I finally arrived at the boss, the Dancing Lion. I absolutely love everything about this fight. First of all, look at how cool this design is. It's literally just a couple dudes in a costume, and you can see their feet poking out from underneath the fabric. This takes inspiration from the Chinese lion dancers in real life, and it's such a fun idea for a boss. The way it moves around is mesmerizing.
But the
It has
lion
some really
head is
interesting
also
attacks. One of the coolest things about
like
this
alive.
fight is how it'll shift back and forth between different elements. It has a wind mode, lightning mode, and ice mode, and each of these is accompanied by unique attacks and hazards all over the arena. This whole
It
encounter
isn't?
is
But it
easily one of my
yelled.
new favorites for Elden Ring. It was tough too. I got him on my 3rd or 4th try, but I had to rely pretty heavily on my Spirit Ashes, and I think it would have taken me significantly longer had I not used them. My summon of choice was a new Shielded Knight Commander because he seemed especially tanky, although I also had the option of summoning one of the giant hands from Karia Manor. I don't typically love to use Spirit Ashes, but I felt compelled to here due to the time limit. To be clear, there's nothing wrong with using them, and the game is very much designed around you taking advantage of them, so you probably should be using them. But yeah, I usually enjoy the challenge that comes from going solo. Also, shout out to the soundtrack on this fight and the DLC as a whole. Just fantastic stuff. After the fight, I continued higher up toward the main tower, but was stopped by some shadow branches that blocked my way. It was a dead end for now, but I found a letter on the ground that pointed me east saying Mikola was spotted in that direction. So I left Bellerot behind and went back to the overworld. I rode north until I found an interesting pile of bones in some shallow water. As is typical of cursed bones in fantasy settings, they came to life and formed into a skeletal dragon for me to fight. So finally we arrive at my main critique for the DLC as I see it so far. This fight was just a reskinned dragon from the base game, and while I could be mistaken, I'm pretty sure it had the same moveset as the dragons we've already fought before. If this was a one-off, sure, whatever. But I noticed a few other enemies from the base game being reused in other areas as I continued to play, and it gave me pause. Now look, in terms of the base game, I'm actually very understanding when it comes to the reuse of bosses and enemies. When you're making a game the size of Elden Ring and want to include 165 boss fights, it's unreasonable to expect them all to be unique. Think about how many animations with FromSoft tier polish go into even a single boss. It's insane, and I think they do a great job of making it work. That being said, I'm a little disappointed with that sort of base game reuse in the DLC. It's not egregious by any means, and was mostly just a few enemies here and there, but yeah, it's the type of thing that, at the very least, made me raise my eyebrows. Surprise and discovery are some of the best parts of a first playthrough of any FromSoft game, and stuff like this slightly diminishes that. I wouldn't be bothered by the reuse of DLC enemies
Celia,
and
what's
bosses
the,
in other DLC areas,
stupid
but I am a
body
little
tag?
bothered by the reuse of base game bosses and enemies in the DLC. Like, I don't know, man. I was just kind of deflated when I found a cave later on with a magma worm inside after I'd already encountered 5 in the base game. And FromSoft, I love you, but do we really need more ulcerated tree spirits in the DLC? To be clear though, the vast majority of enemies and bosses are still new, and the variety of enemies in the DLC seems to still be on par with the rest of the game. As such, this is definitely a nitpick rather than a serious hang-up. And while it didn't rise beyond the level of slight disappointment, I still feel a responsibility to mention things that flag for me rather than just be a source of hype for the DLC. My opinions could change on this, especially when I see the full context of the rest of the DLC. But yeah, this is how I'm feeling right now. Let's move on. After the dragon side boss, I explored a bit more of the overworld and collected some items before deciding to head further east. I rode across a bridge guarded by a few soldiers with a giant ballista at the end. And I'm sorry FromSoft, I got a nitpick here again. When I come across overworld hazards like this, I want them to fuck me up. I want them to be a real threat. For this, I kind of just rode straight across the bridge without getting hit by the ballista whatsoever. Anyway, after crossing the bridge, I was met with a war camp filled with soldiers and tents. It looked pretty similar to what you're seeing on screen now, but I believe this footage is of a different camp because the layout is a bit different and there wasn't a giant fire guy patrolling around. It was a neat little area, and it served as an introduction to yet another legacy dungeon, Castle Ensis. Calling it a legacy dungeon might be a bit too generous though, so let's call it half a legacy dungeon because it has the level structure of one and is very much main content, but it's just not that big. This area was fun to navigate, and once again, it's just a great level. And I even had a few opportunities for stealth with patrolling guards. I'll spare you the details, but fuck man, it's just such a joy to experience FromSoft areas for the first time. At the end of the area, the boss was waiting. It was moon themed, and their name wasn't Renala, instead it was Rellana. Fucking classic. I actually laughed out loud when I saw the name at the bottom of the screen. This boss isn't quite as much of a spectacle as the Dancing Lion, but it's still cool as hell. Rellana is humanoid with dual swords and a little bigger than the player. Lots of flashy attacks and combos. My favorite is one during phase 2 where they summon the moon, kind of like the full moon spell from the base game, but this time it's 2 moons, and instead of being launched as a projectile, they both slam into the ground and create a shockwave. It's awesome. This boss took me a couple tries with my Spirit Ashes, though I think it would have taken me significantly longer if I ran it solo. Beating Rellana opened a door in the arena that led directly into the next major zone, but I wasn't allowed to go out there as part of the preview session. It's possible I missed an alternate progression path similar to how it's handled with Stormveil Castle, but I think this boss is mandatory to enter the next region, so definitely a little less open than the intro to the base game by comparison. With my remaining time, I spent most of the rest of the play session running around to do as much side content as I could. I found a few caves, some catacombs, some ruins, and a bunch of other miscellaneous things. Despite my initial bad impression due to the skeleton dragon reskin fight, I think some of the side stuff is actually a step up from the base game. Specifically, the caves feel more fleshed out. Like, one cave I found near the first Legacy dungeon was this whole area themed entirely around the production of living jars. It was just really visually striking and a cool bit of environmental storytelling with giant jars littering this entire cave. And there were even jars hanging from the ceiling, resulting in some vertical level design and platforming. On top of that, there was a cool reveal where I got to fight human flesh blob monsters that usually end up inside of the jars, but here they're on their own as a new enemy. As a whole, it was a great bit of side content and quite memorable. Another good example of this type of side stuff was this big fire dungeon with even more unique enemies and level architecture. This footage we have of the entrance serves as a good teaser. I won't go into detail here, but yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing I was craving from the base game. More memorable, sizable encounters that break the mold beyond the standard caves, mines, and catacombs. I don't expect every bit of side content to be on this level, but if they keep mixing these in for the whole DLC, we're in for a good time. After doing everything I could find, I spent my remaining few minutes trying out the 2 other characters I could have selected at the beginning to get a feel for their weapons and spells. I've already covered most of this in the weapons section from earlier, but I do want to give special attention to the new sorceries and incantations. Some of these seem especially fun to use. A few of my favorites were the Gravity Bomb Explosion sorcery, an incantation that mimicked the beams of lights from the big flower enemies in the base game, and one where your head turns into a rune bear, kind of like the dragon incantations. Spellcasters are about to have a lot of fun. Before we wrap up, I want to share a few more discoveries that I found that I haven't mentioned yet. First, both of the main bosses drop boss remembrances. For the Dancing Lion, I don't remember the first option you could trade it in for, but I went with the second option, which gave me a new Ash of War. It's essentially a super Hoarfrost stomp, so the ice stomp move from the base game, but this time it's bigger and you can hold L2 to charge it up. Big fan. For Rellana, I had the choice between dual swords and a new spell. I didn't get the chance to try out either for myself, but the spell seemed awesome because it's the same move from the boss fight itself, where 2 moons slam down and create a shockwave. Definitely seems like a fun one. Next, I did in fact find a crafting recipe for a giant fire pot, which I think is the same one shown off in one of the DLC gameplay trailers, but I sadly didn't get to try for myself. So yeah, just confirming that as a consumable item you can find pretty early on. I also found a talisman that would raise my attack power if I used a weapon with a stance weapon skill and held down the stance button for at least 2 seconds. The Uchi Katana would be a good example of a viable weapon for this. and I don't know, I just thought this was a fun idea for a talisman. While running around, I found these blue worm guys. I absolutely love them, but be
Yeah, they're
warned,
cute. I like
if
them.
you attack them, they will go fucking crazy. I'll let you discover what exactly they do when you play for yourself though. I also went to the southeast edge of the map and found a ruined church guarded by some knights. Next to this, there was a little alcove where I found the item America's Blessing. It seemed to function just like Divine Blessing from the Souls games, as it was a consumable that would fully heal you, but its item description caught my attention. I believe it said it was given to Mikola by Marika to aid him on his journey. It also said that Marika only made one of these. I think that's pretty interesting, as it implies Marika directly helped Mikola, and it raises some questions for how Mikola lost it and what that means for his journey. And yeah, that's about it. After the 3 hours were up, the lights came on in the preview room and we were told to stop playing. Before I move on to share a few more thoughts and answer some questions, I want to provide some feedback to Bandai's marketing strategy here. Specifically, what level should you enter the DLC? So for the
300.
preview event, we were all given characters that were level 150 and in new game. Now I think that was fine, but I wouldn't go higher than that. I think somewhere between 120 and 150 is probably ideal, assuming you're not new game plus. Personally, I'd lean toward 120. How big is the DLC? Okay, this is an important question and one that I would love to answer accurately. We're talking about a $40 expansion here, so it's more than reasonable for people to want some assurance that's worth it. Ultimately, I can't answer this for sure, but if I had to guess, I'd say that what I experienced with this preview event was 20% or less of the DLC. 15% might be a better guess though. I could easily be off, but that's the vibe I'm getting. Part of this guess is based off an interview Miyazaki gave, where he said the DLC would contain over 10 new boss fights.
All right, that's enough. So hey, here's the thing. This is important. The build that I made is not particularly strong. It's like a hyper quality build. I have like 40 vigor and 40 endurance, which is like normal. And I just gave myself 50 of all the combat stats. So because I just want to be able to use everything. Like I don't have anything at 60 or 99 or anything stupid like that. 40 endurance ain't normal? Yeah, it is. I had 40 endurance when I beat the game. Right? All right. Well, that's it for me today, guys. I got to get out of here. I'll see you tomorrow. No, I won't. I won't see it. Wait. I won't see you tomorrow. Tomorrow's the only day there's no show. All right. But bye then. Bye. Bye, losers. Bye.